Welcome to Act 1 tonight of our, what we're calling our pre-AWP extravaganza, but that probably doesn't mean much to you, but AWP is a big conference that the writers have every year, and it's been 10 years since it's been in Atlanta. It's going to be starting next week, and so we've got all these writers converging on this part of the country, and so some of the faculty here in the English department at Berry thought we'd use it as an opportunity to bring some friends and former students in to give a reading. So we're really happy that you could join us tonight. So we're going to have two sessions or two acts tonight. This is the first one, of course. The second one's going to start at 8:30, and it'll be cultural events for that too as well. So with that second event, we're going to have Ander Monson is going to be reading creative nonfiction. Jamie Poissant's going to be reading his fiction. Jamie's a Berry alum. And then Francisco Aragon is going to be reading his poetry. So let me just ask you, please check and make sure that your cell phones are turned off, because we don't want any distractions as we're being intoxicated by the written word and the spoken word in here. We don't want anything to sober us up from our intoxication with that. I want to thank Sandra Meek and Mike Mejia, my colleagues in the English department, who have done most of the legwork on putting this whole thing together, and our student assistant, Emily Thompson, who's over there working the video camera. She's been working really hard on this as well, and really appreciate your help with all of this. And we're going to have four speakers who are going to read tonight in this first part of our evening. And I'm very proud to be up here introducing all of them, because they're all special people in my life. And we're going to hear first from Catherine Meeks, who is a Berry alum from '05. She just finished her master's in science from the University of Montana, where she studied environmental writing. And I assume that she's going to read something there. She says that she's been writing about the South ever since she left it. Catherine was a freshman at Berry when I first met her, and she was taking my 400 level Southern Lit class and got the highest grade in the class. And she just kept doing great work all the way through her time here. And she's going to be followed by Alex Quinlan, who is finishing up his MFA at Washington University in St. Louis. He's got a prestigious fellowship there. And Alex was here at the same time that Catherine was, and he graduated in '05 as well. And Alex is a homeboy because he's from my hometown of Memphis, Tennessee. And so let's hear it from Memphis, and good barbecue and good people. And Catherine is from my adopted hometown of Nashville, where my family still is. So let's hear it for Tennessee all around. Anyway, after we hear from Alex and Catherine, then we're going to hear June Spence read from her work. And June and I got to be friends, and everybody who met her around here fell in love with June when she was the writer in residence here at Berry in the 99-2000 year, right? Not so awfully long ago. And June is the author of two books, a collection of short stories called Missing Women and Others, and that book won a whole slew of awards. And then it also got her a job as our writer in residence here at Berry. And while she was here, she was working on a novel called Change Baby that she published after she left. And are you going to read from either of those, or maybe? We just have to wait and find out. Anyway, June is a visiting writer at Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she lives there with her husband, the writer Scott Hewler, and now with their son Lewis, who I'm looking forward to meeting someday. And maybe a few of you caught the reading that Scott and June gave a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago here, right here in this very room. Anyway, we're really happy to have June come back and read for us. And then the fourth reader is going to be the poet Jeffrey Franklin. He's a Chattanooga native, an old friend of mine. He teaches on the faculty at University of Colorado at Denver, and he's got his feet in both ponds. He teaches Victorian literature and poetry writing. And when I met him, he was studying poetry, and somehow he got it in his head he wanted to get a PhD in literature too. And Jeff's going to read from his new book of poems for the Lost Boys. And I don't want to say much more. I usually like to give longer introductions, but we've got so many great words to hear, and every word I say, I feel like I'm stealing better words from other people who are going to get up here. So I'm going to turn things over to some great people, starting with Catherine Meeks.
Hey. I feel really privileged to be here tonight reading with such a prestigious group of people. I don't necessarily feel like I belong here, but I'll go for it anyway. I am going to read something from what I just finished the program at University of Montana, and I did that with a collection of essays in creative nonfiction. And so the essay that I'm going to read from, I'm going to read 5 or so pages from a 30-page essay, so it's just going to be sort of a snippet. And it is about the civil rights movement the aspect of the civil rights movement that was based in Nashville, my hometown, as Jim said, and sort of a connection that I found out about related to my family history there. So hopefully that's all the explanation that you'll need for this to make sense. And the title of the essay is called Armageddon at 11th and Broadway. I knew very few black people growing up in Nashville. I knew Louise, who still cooked and cleaned for my grandparents and was a familiar figure on my frequent visits to their home. I knew the few black students sprinkled among my and my sister's classes at Christ the King, the Catholic school down the road from our house. One of these few, Ed Hamlet, was for a time the only black boy in the entire school. As such, he was responsible for reading Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech every year on his annual holiday. Besides Ed and his mother, who taught 6th grade and was locally famous for having gone to college with Oprah, I knew of Jiggs, my great-grandmother's gardener, who was known to take his paycheck directly to the liquor store and sometimes return to his employer's home later in the afternoon to ask for an advance. Once, he sold my great-grandmother's lawnmower to a pawn shop, where she went to buy it back the next day. I knew Uncle Remus from Song of the South, and I knew Amos and Andy. I knew Mammy from Gone with the Wind. I knew, too, that General Nathan Bedford Forrest, the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, wasn't all bad. That he had, in fact, enough good qualities to justify the large portrait of him hanging in my aunt and uncle's living room. It is easiest not to take a good, hard look at this catalog, with its blurring of facts and fictions, its disappearing tracks, its peripheries. To look is to trip a wire attached to a weight that falls from the ceiling and cracks an egg into a skillet warmed with pride and shame. It is the Rube Goldberg machine of the Civil War's children's children trying to make sense of their race and their place. It was on an ordinary trip to the downtown public library during Christmas break my junior year of college that I tripped the wire. I had walked hurriedly across the street from the parking lot, glancing up and down Church Street before crossing. Not long ago, the street had held a struggling mall popular in my family for last-minute Christmas shopping. Before that, 2 blocks down, my grandfather's department store had reigned for over 3 decades on the corner of Church and 5th. I've only seen the mammoth building in photographs and old advertisements, where its byline reads, "The greatest store of the Central South," and further proclaims Kane Sloan to be the only downtown department store with a built-in parking center. In my mind, the store was populated by women wearing fancy hats, always either going to or coming from church. As I made my way to the library, though, all of what was once Kane Sloan had been demolished. Downtown was no longer the thriving shopping district of an earlier age, one that had supported Kane Sloan for so many years. My grandfather stopped working at the store in the mid-70s after Allied Stores, a conglomerate umbrella organization that Kane Sloan joined in an attempt to expand their locations and product lines, named someone else president and moved his office to the basement. He remained for a few years as manager of the restaurant and parking garage, then bowed out of the family business as his father had done some 5 years prior. The name remained with the store in its new locations in the malls rapidly gaining mass at Green Hills, Rivergate, and Hickory Hollow for another 10 years or so, then became a part of the past. When I went to the library that day in December, I made my way through stacks still in the process of being filled and along hallways decorated with paintings and plaques, until eventually I reached a small room in one of the far corners of the building. There were clear signs that whatever the ultimate purpose of the room, it was not yet complete. Dust on the concrete floor and signs that read temporary made my being there seem almost an intrusion, as though I had walked in on someone not fully dressed. I pushed the door open gently, feeling the air pressure on the other side reluctant to give way for my entry. The room, I quickly assessed, was filled with posters and photographs chronicling Nashville's civil rights history of the early 1960s. I leaned in close to the first photo, close enough to whisper, or to pass something large, awkward, and fragile from my arms into someone else's. It must have been a sunny day when the picture was taken. Bold light streams in through a wall of windows, clearly outlining the figures gathered close inside the frame. A crowd undulates in a small diner, some yelling, some waving their arms, and all white. One man from the crowd is in the midst of pulling a black man by the collar of his sweater off of a seat in front of the diner's counter. The black man reaches out his arms toward the counter, as if to hang on. His reflection stares up at him from a sea of sunlight illuminating the counter in front of him. Another man is seated at the counter, his face turned away from the camera and toward the scene of the tussle, his hands pressed firmly onto the clean, crumbless, shining counter. Underneath the photo, the caption reads, "Agitators attack a sit-in demonstrator on February 27, 1960, a day that James Lawson dubbed Big Saturday, because it was the first day of major confrontations during the Nashville sit-ins. That day, 81 demonstrators were arrested for disturbing the peace, while no agitators were arrested." In the list of stores in which demonstrations took place that day, I found Kane Sloan's. The store in which the photo was taken remained unspecified, and to me the message was clear: take your pick. As I stood in that spot with my arms folded and my brow knitted and the smell of fresh lacquer hanging heavy in the silent air, I began to piece together a story. I vaguely remembered having read about the famous sit-in staged by 4 students from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College at the Greensboro Woolworth's lunch counter on February 1st, 1960. Wherever I had encountered it, this event was recounted as though it existed in isolation, if not from the other campaigns of the civil rights movement, then certainly from my own family. I had not heard, however, that students from Nashville who were trained in nonviolent protest and whose first battles of the movement took place in the city went on to become some of the original members, including the original chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They led the freedom rides through Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. John Lewis, one of the men savagely beaten on national television by Alabama state troopers after marching across the Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, came first to Nashville from rural Alabama to attend American Baptist College. He and other leaders of the movement were trained, in part, at my grandfather's lunch counter. This was the first time I'd really considered who my grandfather was. My grandfather, the prominent Nashville businessman. You see, before I came upon the name of his store in the library exhibit, he was just Granddaddy, comprised of little pieces I put together to try to know him by. One piece of particular significance to me was his stuffed donkey, which I found on one of my many journeys as a 6-year-old into the dusty world of old dolls and plates and newspapers that was my grandparents' attic. As soon as I saw the donkey, I wanted it. I would have pretended at first that it did not catch my attention, and continued to casually peruse the boxes of baby clothes, kitchen gadgets, and books, listening to my grandmother's running commentary on these the gathered pieces of a lifetime of holding on to whatever there is room to keep. I must have carried it down under one arm, as though it were the most natural thing in the world for a girl to arrive in a place empty-handed and come out with a donkey the size of a hound dog under her arm. I must have thought no one would notice. "Wait, you can't take that." My mother's concerned voice pierced the void in which only I and the donkey existed. "That was Granddaddy's when he was little." All the more reason, I thought, that I should have it. I was little. It was difficult for me to imagine my grandfather, who walked with canes and had smoked unfiltered Camels for 50 years, needing a stuffed animal. I wasn't allowed to take the donkey home that day. My grandfather needed to be consulted, my mother said, and it was rude, she added, to ask somebody for something for yourself. You needed a lobbyist. I enlisted my grandmother to take up the cause, and I had no doubts as to her success. My grandfather, after all, read the Wall Street Journal while he ate breakfast. And while he certainly laughed, he rarely played, though he had called me over once to show me how the head of one of his canes twisted off and had a small knife point, no longer than an inch, hidden on the inside. I later wondered how anyone who actually needed a cane would be nimble and quick enough to pick it up, unscrew the top, and, presumably, no longer use the cane for its designed purpose, but rather as a defense against an oncoming and hopefully slow assailant. He was easily persuaded in this instance, and I brought the donkey home after my next visit to his house, mumbling a shy "thank you" when he passed it into my arms. By the time I was 10 or 11, Granddaddy had switched from cane to golf cart, which he drove around the yard, with several of the younger grandchildren riding next to him on the vinyl seat. When I spent afternoons in the pool, he would spend hours at a time sitting in the front seat of his Lincoln Continental, parked in the driveway. He would remain there long after returning from an errand, listening to the radio in the haven of quiet. I would pass by him, towel wrapped around my waist, on the heels of my grandmother, who had promised lemonade, barely noticing that he was there. Door closed, car running, not moving anywhere at all. Thanks.
Good evening. Just going to jump right in, start reading. Going to read a few shorter poems and then an excerpt from a longer poem that's called The Invention of the Afterlife. If Drone, Mesmer. Light as if drawn by a hand tremulant in a child's, character intermittent, uniformly erratic, to be later removed. The smudged light, unremoved, is as if hinging from some chameleal material, a lode, stone, or star, is what turns, as if orbit were praise, as if praise were not profligate, not a confession of prolapse, of custom, of customary regard. Turns flickeringly, is a figure, is mere in the wormlight. It is gusting for a home, and it is gutsy, is drawing nearer the coast than safety is. Or the not straight seam, as of a picture when one wasn't there for the taking, of load as deposit of, as guide to, the stone star, the stone mica or quartz flecked glittering, and are what turns, in calcitrant orbit, kicking out, then, as the prodigal turning back and away from away. Marshland. The man nodding off at his kitchen table is just beginning to confuse himself with the angel standing behind him. The angel purses his lips, crosses his arms over his chest, and taps his foot a couple times. The angel asks for a piece of bread. The man kisses his wife on her forehead, and because his lips are made of the radiant dust the bodies of angels are made of, she doesn't wince. He peels back the onion skin onto which his kitchen and his wife are painted. Behind it is a desert he's seen pictures of. He walks through the desert, walks until his skin takes on the tawny color and parched feel of sand. He walks until his skin becomes the sand, until he can see the ridge of dunes, wind-sculpted, serpent-tracked. At the end of the desert, just before the desert drops off into salt fields. When he reaches the dunes, he walks not over, but into them. Inside, there's a table and chair. A note has been left. Sit, if that makes you happy. If he were awake, he'd probably wonder if his unhappiness is any more desperate than that of his neighbors and friends. He would only distract himself from these, his last few moments, in which he'll never suspect his wife has poisoned him with crushed sea mango seeds, that she folded them in a pillowcase and pressed them into powder under the heel of her shoe, that she spent half the morning doing this, the other half making a stew spicy enough to mask the powder's bitterness, all for no particular reason, only the general one, that she is tired of seeing him look at her without even the slightest flinch of recognition, of seeing him look at everything that way. There's a lot I don't know. His name, or if his wife had to walk out to the salt swamps at the edge of town, and in the cool center of night, wade out to a cluster of sea mangoes. Whether she had to cut the fruit down, if her ankles glistened, where the salt traced itself onto her skin. This one's called The Father, Recent Sightings. I made a private screening of the last time I saw him. I called it None Were Spared. See, it's all just a joke to you. Fish scales silver the father's forearms like primitive armor. He sits in the front seat of the engineless Cougar he bought for $300. Some bad roads don't stop reacquainting themselves with horizon. Inability to flee to another view of ill imitation doesn't change this. Everything was brass, everything tarnished. The ticket girl's eyes fishbowled whenever I said her name. Not even the father, the executive producer, showed. Scene. Jacketless despite the cold. The leather miracle, pumping a cigarette end of the father's lips as tight around it as a rubber washer water sealing a screw. Fish guts purple his palms and cuticles. The reek and the cut light suspended in the milky translucence of the quilkeen bones. The stars. Polaris allure in the mouth of the southern fish. Goitered with emptiness like a deserted box office, I put up a sign. After the likeness and after the image came what was never called by any name. The second screening revised the first, included, among other actions, the drip of an iron gutter pipe, either rusted through or loose at a joint. One pouring raw sugar into the mouth of the sleeping other. Teal-feathered birds shouting their owners' names into the darkness a pursuant cougar flings them into. a sleeper turning in sleep, jaw set against wakefulness. The father wringing a fire poker from the mother's hands, twisting the wrought iron like pretzel dough. The blurred joint work of speech and water sheeting over glass. The sleeper waking with glistening chin. Okay, and this is our last pit stop before the admission of the afterlife. It's called, "You Must Not Forget That This Body Is Not Your Own." And for the philosophy students in the crowd, that is indeed a line from Epictetus, as I'm sure you noticed. Dear carrier of water, the north wind howls across the clay jug's lip as an open hand stitches the seam between ask and the silence following the wind. It is like a house the thieves steal away from, leaving it empty, taking nothing. As fields, when they burn dry, burn resistless, fire fists around the palm like a pebble, around the pond like a pebble in the palm. The hand may offer receipt of offering. Hard winter training, signals want of, desire for, battle. This body is not a body, can be punished justly, or not, it can be abused, is not decorative. Only it cannot resist being taken away. Torturer's hammer, bladed gaze of the tortured, avenue for the delivery of information and enticement, weapon drawn against itself. For months, no matter-of-fact spring given way to, like a runaway train, anything freighted with abandon. Unrest and disquiet, all you want. Your eyes are not your own, says an onlooker who is patient among the shocks of crabgrass, who has mastered his desires beneath ochre branches of elms and amid the cicada drone, his pulse unmatched. Only he can make him tremble. Only he, when someone whispers to make his skin reptilian, is a saguaro on a landscaped island in a strip mall parking lot, collapsing absurdly while no one watches. Now it gets really depressing. Okay, so here's just a few pieces out of a poem that's somewhere in the range of 30 to 40 pages now, so try to give you a little bit of a sense of what that's like. And it's, again, called The Invention of the Afterlife. Some preliminary questions. Where do you come from? The voice that is the voice of a man falling through a well no more belongs to him than the epiglottis of mirror water in the well's gaping mouth that reflects his own gaping mouth as it ripples open in order to contain him. What is your experience of hunger? The crowd battered the sides of the house, yes. Yes, their faces were the faces of fish on their sides in the bottom of the John boat, gulping wildly the quarter-inch of water. They are a people of fishermen, a water-loving people. The water wasn't water, the water was salt. In the boats, there was an angel in the water, kept the men from drowning while they angled. What it required of them was given. It required of them everything. What about before the angel in the water? What did they do for food? What for sleep? For the longest time, everything lacked definition. Some of the people felt a willow rod tremble in their hands, but there was no water, nothing divinable or to define. When they sat to breathe, they gasped. The air was as if it held, as if in solution, tiny drills of glass. They sought and were self-seeking. Will you tell me the name? Not of the angel, not of the men, but of the one who did this to them? It is lie in the eyes and loving, the lusty wind and the mother cat's rough tongue, a band of barbed wire tightly bound around the chest of the one breathing who breathes. I cannot speak it as deeply as he can manage. In the ladder of perception, the first love is love of vision. Black horses, the sheen licking their blue-black manes, and the scrap light that cuts through hickory branches and silvers the flat, shallow troughs in the rain-charged creek. Tick black and shuddering at the sound of its name. Ferric, and like a horse ambling toward the farrier's handful of sweetgrass with its head askew. It is like a thing suspicious of its own desires. The deer's eyes click open, click wider when other animals rake along the wood's margin. The hooves of the deer, cleft and clatter-sounding, leave an undulant tracework of bicameral divots across the clay-rick, hard-packed ground, a layer of time grit settled on a layer of unsound, water-rubbled limestone. Sinkholes open and swallow tall pines nearly wholly, like a stiletto heel punching through rain-softened ground, so that the pine-top birds' nests sit flush with the low line of privet. As a pack of mange-patched coyotes, their noses cut short by the scent-killing rain, fans across and encompasses the field, like a sure hand around a throat made voiceless by its grip. They trigger a flight unchartable, but by the rule of misrule. Lamp-like and marine, the eyes of the deer, clicking in the soft belly of the moonlit night, flicker fearful and obsidian, burn black into the wink and glass eye of a dark safety. Then I'll just close with this one sonnet called The Silver Coffin. And this whole poem is kind of a slant take on an elegy. And this is about as straightforward as it gets. Bronze double doors open. The gray-black surges, a murder of crows, a siege of sandhill cranes. Disengage the sanctuary. Dirges, like red-crested birds, bolder shades in rain than full sun. When I lay my burden down, swabs a sea of caged and brittle ears, before the drowsing cornhusk baritone is muted as the drab-eyed walkers near the bright, unveering convoy. Windshields flash, a blur of still traffic and whirling lights. The sight, wet and overloomed by oaks, where, just as crows will carry off and stash a pearl or diamond earring, anything bright, I, in unbelief, helped to carry and broke. Thanks.
Leave my book behind, so don't change my mind again. It's too late, I can't go back now. I kept changing my mind about what to read. I'm so glad to be here tonight. Thank you so much for inviting me, Jim. I'm going to read a short and a short. I'll be attentive to time. If my short is not as short as I thought it was, we'll skip the short. This is called North Hills, a memoir, and North Hills was a mall, and actually is a mall again now. It was a kind of always somewhat decrepit second-tier mall in Raleigh where I grew up, but it was one of my places. It was like it became a place in the community, and it was a place I have a lot of memories attached to. So when they were finally tearing it down, I had all kinds of sort of sad feelings about it, and it was a way of thinking about the history of my little town and just remembering things from growing up. So it's sort of it was sort of a lamentation for the end of my mall. Soon North Hills will be no more, In its place will sprout more of the upscale shops and premium offices now encroaching the asphalt perimeter like kudzu. I suppose it's time. North Hills has long been homely elder sister to Crabtree Valley Mall, its demise slow but inexorable. Today, its shabbiness is trumped only by South Hills Mall and Cary, the little match girl of retail, and perhaps some of the original Burlington outlets. Local developer John Kane and his crew will pretty up the site and no doubt improve it immensely. Soon all will be gilded and posh, and if the rumors are true, pedestrian-friendly and rife with high-density housing and retailers great and small. Still, I'll dearly miss the hulking beige decrepitude that was my marketplace, my town center. I grew up going to North Hills Mall. I knew it most intimately from the mid-'70s to the early '80s when I went there with my family. The parking lot teemed with station wagons and VW Beetles then. Raleigh was stolidly middle class, and Six Forks north of Strickland was still out in the middle of nowhere, as in, why would you want to live there? Perched on the lip of the Beltline, the cusp between old Raleigh and new, North Hills was my mall. North Hills didn't put on airs. Whatever brought the kids was worth doing. Twice a year they used to scatter sawdust on the ground floor promenade and host a petting zoo. One crank of the gumball machine dispensed enough feed pellets to fill a child's cupped palm. I learned some important things on these occasions, such as goats like synthetic fabrics as much as natural ones, and llamas spit. Imagine a petting zoo at Crabtree, which was the top tier mall. Inconceivable unless it was some promotional for pashmina. I bought my very first Christmas gifts with my own allowance from a long-standing North Hills tenant, World Bazaar, a proto-Pier 1. These included a bamboo back scratcher and a monkey carved out of a coconut husk. These items were likely not on my parents' wish list, but they were well within my budget. The exotic items at World Bazaar fired my imagination. I longed to travel to distant ports of call. Supper at North Hills was generally a chili dog and fries from Scotty's, or maybe a Chick-fil-A. There was a steakhouse at North Hills too, but we never went. Too expensive. About once a week my family ate at K&W Cafeteria. I was nervous giving the servers my order as I slid my tray along the rails. If they asked before I'd chosen, they'd go on to the next person while I hovered there, racked by indecision, and it was hard to catch their eye again. Sometimes the missed opportunity dictated my choice. I'd want Salisbury steak, but end up with fried fish farther down the line. I would try anything that landed on my tray, right down to the gelatin cubes, but my favorites were chicken and dumplings, or the spaghetti served with an ice cream scoop. The gluey noodles and sauce retained the shape of the scoop. I'd alternate between slivers of chocolate or lemon meringue pie. All the adults smoked cigarettes, and their smoke mingled freely with the smell of cooked food, and a sort of fog hung over the dining room. It was not unpleasant. At summer's end, when we went back to school shopping, I learned the tyrannies of fashion. The Gap was for Levi's only then. Did you realize that? That the Gap was just selling Levi's? You young folks didn't know that. Store brand knockoffs like the Gap brand were subject to ridicule. Like if you wore Gap jeans, they were the cheap jeans. If you were inattentive to fads, you might find yourself conspicuously toting a lunchbox when everyone else had gone back to brown bagging, or still scribbling with an archaic No. 2 pencil in a season of erasable Bics. Book bags or backpacks were for a time forbidden. Carrying more books than could be deftly tucked under the arm suggested you favored learning and put you in the enemy camp. When the right items had been procured, my sister and I would raid the record bar for its free book covers printed with album art. Big. In the 4th grade, all my school texts were protected by Sean Cassidy's smash hit LP, Under Wraps. The art supply store, Hungate's, thrilled me with its smooth charcoal sticks, papers of every texture, and airy balsa wood planks meant for some Lilliputian construction project. Through glass, I could monitor the progress of the adjacent hobby shop's sprawling miniature train set. Its expansion across rolling hills of green felt seemed relentless, ever more tiny shrubbery and scrubby pines, end-to-end barber shops, ice cream parlors and general stores, pinky nail people frozen in attitudes of greeting, waiting, or work, bright enameled boxcars linked and looping through tunnels, over bridges, barely pausing at the station. Last stop, Woolworths. Upstairs, the powders and perfumes and lotions, plus a small diner with swivel stools. Downstairs, the cheap canvas sneakers and bath mats and parakeets and fish. We seldom left without a plastic bag of guppies. The clouded bowl at home needed constant replenishment. When North Hills housed the public library, the arrangement seemed custom-made for my mom and me. She was a fanatical shopper and I was a bookworm. She could drop me off and hit the stores for as long as she liked, and I could sit and read until enlisted to try on corduroys or help carry packages to the car. Sadly, my library visits dwindled considerably when it relocated, though her shopping sojourns continue unabated to this day. Her favorite department store was Charlotte-based Ivy's. She still calls it by its original name, Ivy Taylor's. It was a little upscale, classy even, and my mom was pretty and stylish and earned her own money, so she permitted herself the occasional indulgence. My father preferred to buy his clothes at JCPenney on the other side of the mall, which she deemed cheapo. So even in this regard, they were at opposite ends. By the time Dillard's bought out Ivy's, they both remarried, and my mom was living out of state, so she missed out on a mighty clearance sale. Dillard's gutted the place, threw out all the fixtures and furnishings, everything Ivy's. I went dumpster diving for mannequins with a friend. We found a lot of torsos, stray limbs, nothing left intact. There's a little space here. On May 29, 1972, the year Crabtree opened, a 22-year-old school janitor withdrew his savings from the bank, paid his father the $30 he'd borrowed, purchased a .22 caliber Marlin rifle, and opened fire in the North Hills parking lot. He struck 11 people, wounding 7 and killing 4. 5, he turned the gun on himself. Nobody knows why. There was a lot of shooting going on. People were still talking about the sniper in Texas. George Segregation Forever Wallace sent his condolences to the people of North Carolina from his hospital bed, a bullet in his spine. It was getting to where you couldn't leave the house, people said. My dad's best friend, R.B. Stokes, was there when the shooting began, and he dragged a wounded person indoors to safety. I don't know whether the person R.B. brought inside survived, and I can't ask R.B. because he died recently. He wasn't one to boast, so I doubt anyone outside of my dad and the person R.B. helped ever knew about it. I was 3 at the time of the shooting at North Hills, and I don't remember it, but my dad tells me he'd taken my sister and me shopping that morning, and we hadn't left the mall more than an hour before it began. When I asked my mom about it, she swears this is the first she has heard of us being there. She may, in fact, call my father up 30 years later to berate him for unwittingly putting us near harm's way, and then worse, failing to disclose the information. A little space. In high school, I had a very stern but scrupulously just algebra teacher who moonlighted as a manager at JCPenney. Whenever I heard her being paged over the intercom, my face would burn with shame because she was holding down 2 jobs while I browsed and dallied, neglecting my math homework. My then boyfriend worked at the place that made big cookies, the ones they slice like a pizza. During his tenure, the company developed a big granola cookie, but some trademark issue prevented them from calling it granola in their promotions, so they called it granola la and put musical notes all around. The boyfriend transcended this soon after by attending a very good university, whereupon we quickly lost contact. My sister got her prom dress at Ronson's, a boutique on the Ivy's end of the mall. The dress was wedding gown white and shimmery, with spaghetti straps and a full skirt. I'm sure she was beautiful, blonde hair swirling and skin so tan against the white satin, but I hated her back then. I couldn't see it. Later, I borrowed the dress for my junior prom, which I attended with the cookie guy, and I was not one bit beautiful. That wasn't supposed to matter because we were going to the prom to be ironic, but I wanted to be ironic and beautiful. I went away to college, and I lived out of state for several years after that. Each visit home brought some startling change to my attention. I'd turn down a street I thought I knew, Shelley Road, for example, and it wouldn't take me where I wanted to go. Shelley Lake, nowhere in sight. Driving into downtown from 401, I discerned, to my astonishment, a sort of skyline. Coming in from the opposite direction on Atlantic Avenue, I saw it again, a cluster of skyscrapers, well, tallish buildings, let's say, rising from the tree line, radiating out from that core were new schools and subdivisions, brew pubs and jazz clubs, sushi bars and day spas, all suspended in a matrix of shopping centers. The traffic had gotten serious and turned upscale military. Jeeps and trucks and all-terrain hybrids glossed up and shod with beefy tires, benevolent chrome grills like grinning teeth bearing you down. They tore past North Hills, that plain brown loaf, and so did I. Now it is Ghost Mall. Tumbleweeds and the stray bargain hunter drift past the vacated stores. What makes me love North Hills is what killed it, the quiet refuge it came to provide, a zen-like retreat during the holiday hustle. Its makeover attempts over the years made me root for it, though the results were not unlike a fading starlet with avalanching facelift angling desperately for a comeback. Perhaps its very failure to thrive absolves it from the sins malls are said to represent: heedless development, greedy consumption, decadence, waste. It didn't change nearly so much as Raleigh did, which made it steadfast but doomed. I don't know what North Hills means to me. It's a place I went with my family, or with one parent or another, then just my sister, just my friends, or by myself. From infant to junior to Mrs., I marveled at stuff and disdained stuff and wanted stuff I couldn't have and got stuff I didn't want. Meanwhile, it kept the rain off my head. No more, no less. To pay my respects, I'll wander the halls and purchase cut-priced mementos until the place is rubble, for time is the ultimate clearance event, reducing malls and mountains and men alike. Everything must go. This is a very short, another just kind of a memory piece, and this is about the 4th of July. My dad used to set off the fireworks at the state fairgrounds, and so we got, well, you'll see. July 4th, 1977, State Fairgrounds, Raleigh. Our grandfather's dancing on the Clogger stage with the mayor, little 4'8" tennis shoe shod Isabella Cannon. He is drunk. I've never known him to dance. I am 8 and want to dress like the Cloggers, the ribbon tap shoes and gingham dress with crinolines. I ride ponyback in a slow, bored circle. The ponies smell sweet from hay and manure, and next year I'll be too big to ride them. Already my toes drag the ground. The long version of American Pie plays all day on the radio. It ends on one station and we twist the knob until it resumes again. I don't understand what the words mean, but the sad chorus keeps turning in my chest. Drove my Chevy to the levee, them good old boys, this'll be the day that I die. My father and great uncle have been setting up for the fireworks since morning. City workers have buried steel pipes for launching the bombs and fire trucks idle close by. By sundown, many cans of Pabst have been drained and a flat tea-colored pint makes the rounds. No one's scared of anything but rain. It's hardly worth coming just to sit in the stands. We're down by the racetrack with the shooters and get to lie atop car hoods and watch the display projected directly overhead. The bombs come in parcels the size and shape of ostrich eggs and have exotic names from China. Dragon dancing with phoenix, blossom after thunder, golden silk and silver rain, happy song. My father wields a sizzling flare, backs up to each fuse and ignites one after another. Missiles hiss skyward, break open into umbrellas of green and gold fire. Branches of red lightning crack and dribble, hurling glitter. A white dot bomb punctuates all the color, and I dig my knuckles into my ears, anticipating the blast that comes a beat later. The finale is the only part my father gets to watch because it's all on one fuse. He crouches to light it, springs away and rolls to get clear. The firmament erupts with pulsing streamers. Hot ash rains down. He's hidden in smoke. I scream myself hoarse. He's back on his feet when the haze clears, deaf and reeking of gunpowder. Bombs have exploded 10 feet off the ground, spit flame in his face, and my father walks away grinning, on fire with his own potent mixture of nerves and luck.
Thanks for coming out to support live literature. It's a good thing to do. I'm just curious, how many of you in the audience have had, or now have, or will have Professor Jim Watkins? Raise your hands. Now, don't you think for being such a great teacher and for enriching your cultural life, he deserves a round of applause? That's right. Let's see here. Let's start at the beginning. The gun in the chair. My first shot caught him cleanly in the crease of his hip as he lay on his side in a sniper's pose, a crippling wound at the least, probably death if paintballs were bullets. I had chosen my moment, ducked from the cover of warped plywood nailed between aspens, and sprinted through the close trees, crouching to pant among the sagebrush of the open prairie. Running hunched over the clasped gun, I circled his position, pinned down as he was by the pneumatic thwap, thwap, thwap of my partner's fire. I would like to say I noted the Ming blue of the sky, admired the patterning of the aspens, their bark, a creamy green khaki, but instead I felt a quietly murderous joy. He is my son. I had not wanted to join in this game. The current war raging and open-ended, he nearly of age. How could I be sure he would know the difference I just had forgotten? The parents are laughing. He and his buddies cajoled me, but it was I who chose to play. After all, I had seen the gun, known to see it in the broken off chair leg, its tapered foot, a nozzle, the two spindles hacked short with my father's saw, spaced just right for machine gun handles, and I knew how to make that sound with my tongue, like bursts of rattlesnake mojo, then yell, "I got you, you're dead!" I would like to say I yelled it once more when I saw the unnatural splatter, pink blood, in the crease of his hip where he lay, but the down vest crumpled there softened the impact, so that for an instant he did not register the hit, as happens to some in the heat of battle, and I chose instead to shoot him again. This time on the skin of his arm. The welt a red-rimmed crater days after. If I could understand why I did that, we might do without war. I would like to say paintballs are only paintballs, not bullets, but then the chair would be only the chair. I want to dedicate this next poem to Jeff Lidke, whom I just met this evening, here in your Department of Religious Studies, is that what it's called? Fellow Buddhist, this poem is called Hillbilly Zen. It starts by ventriloquizing a man I greatly respect. "Hurry every chance you get," Tom said, a near smile on his face I couldn't decipher. I was 15, come to live in his woods for the summer, rising from my tent at dawn to hold the plumb bob steady as I could at the end of the 100-foot survey chain Tom pulled to a vibrating stillness between us. I loved best the clear voice of the machete ringing one note from the sliced oval of sapling like a bell that calls the world to contemplation. I understood the harder substance hones. There, the file's whiskers of steel glinting the pleasure in mastery of a pure machine. One day, sharpening a benchmark steak, I sliced a clean line instantly jeweled with crimson beads down the outside of my pinky finger, opening like a snap bean to the bone. "Yep, you done it now," was all Tom said. It was a kind of holiday. The switchback drive off the mountain down to the valley's clinic, shouldered between Reb and Bud in the back. I forgot about my finger as the beater Chevy swung each outside curve toward the yawning valley, and Tom, one-handing the wheel, craned around to tell me about running shine on moonless nights. I could hear, can still hear, the bored-out cylinders roaring down the gap, see the cop's headlights swing bend to bend in the rearview mirror. I top a rise, kill the lights, and cut the engine, drop down into an overgrown logging road. That moment there, sitting in the pitch black, listening to the engine tick, no hurry at all. The Fury cruiser cannonballs past and fades, the hillbilly zen of wiliness bred to ease. It took me 35 years, Tom. Let's see, what's going to be next? Let's see. I can't remember where my own poems are. Well, I know it's here somewhere. Okay, well, I couldn't find that one, so you just have to wait. I'll read a different one instead. This one's called Captain Seaweed, aka Checkers the Clown. It has an epigraph, you know, that little quote underneath the title. It says, "Turn your frown upside down. For your next party, call Checkers the Clown. Picnics, birthdays, parties, corporate events, 321-8079. His car door." How many decades can a man sham wonder? His belly now thick as a bowl on an oak tree, his labored smoker's breathing as he exhorts the children toward another peak of squeals, or from the older kids, incredulous jeers. "I saw that. I know how you did that." Is there anywhere enough milk of human kindness to wash down a steady diet of prepubescent heckling and not lie down nights with thoughts of murder? Though perhaps even worse is the kid like me who could not enjoy a birthday clown, dreading his failure, biting a knuckle each time the gimcrack gizmo faltered, the covering smile brightened, the patent saccharin bathed all wounds. Every clown I meet, I want to punch in the face. And that's how I feel today. My son's birthday. Leaning against the chimney in the converted garage with the slouching 9-year-old neophyte skeptics, as Captain Seaweed, a bead of sweat rolling now down from the brim of his skipper's cap, tugs a red, white, and blue hanky from his fist, an American flag, pure propaganda schlock, though now even the back row jaws hang slack as the Jiffy and the Smucker's jars change places. the linked rings that a stalwart volunteer couldn't part juggle freely. The faces in the front row now undergo a change, begin to sharpen, then glow, then open, until sitting there on their heels with their heads tilted back, they want nothing this moment will not give them. How did he do that? Do it again. Do it again. One more short. This poem I wrote after a previous visit to your beautiful campus. And it occurred when my daughter, who was then fairly young, wandered out into one of the front fields. I don't know if you have a name for that field out sort of right on the highway. Oh well, toward the corner. The field. And there were cows in the field that she didn't know were there until she got out in the middle of it and found herself surrounded. And this poem is dedicated to my buddy Jim. And it's called At Berry College. Here, sons and daughters of the Confederacy escape the heat of Atlanta's temptations, which are fanned to ever hotter intensity by Coliseum evangelist amens. If the liberal arts are somewhat less liberal, they are no less deeply contemplated by a book-hugging girl who follows the pull of an idea that's just been precisely dated out of Blackstone Hall and into the fields lying like rumpled cast-off counterpanes around the foot of Berry's mountains, then yields to the summons of the grass, a high jet plane's white trail, a dash of chalk, the sky a screen ample to that idea, that mind. If then St. Francis came walking like a Nazarene, spread arms aflutter with cardinals and wrens, no one would think it out of place. But now, a towhead girl of 8, a faculty child, no doubt, has followed a black Hereford cow over the hill and found herself in a field alone with a herd that finds her curious. Snuffling with nostrils into which she could slide her hand. The heifers bucking to get close, the idea cow too fully verified. Stepping from the shadow of a portico, an English prof looks up to see a girl topping a rise with measured steps, a tableau of cattle walking to each side. A miracle? Or merely the new patron saint of learning? I haven't put them up here yet, but I do have books if anybody's interested.
Thank you, Jeffrey. You made me squirm a little bit, but it's my job. We're going to take a break for a little while. We do have the first authors, well, we have June's books and we have Jeff's books here, and we're waiting for Alex's and Catherine's books. They'll be along in not too many years, right? Not too many months, right? They're coming. I can tell. Anyway, we'll resume with Act 2 of the pre-AWP extravaganza very shortly. Thanks. Thank you for the readers. You were great.